All right, so this is going to be a quick update, mostly for accountability. I want to make sure I'm doing this at least once a week up until the point where I'm starting to design levels. Then we'll probably do, a couple of weeks, a 2 times a week update. Just something that's a little bit more exciting than the back end stuff that I've been working on. But let's go ahead and dive into it by starting the experience. So we still have our placeholder screens here. We're going to skip past these. We are going to anchor that to the wall. So in this case, I don't really have much changes to this particular test environment. What I want to be able to do is I have different spots where enemies can actually spawn in. So you see a little bit of the enemies now spawning in before they kind of loop back forward. But we would have things like, enemies that would spawn on top of the roof. And they would, behave differently than enemies that spawned on the ground. So like enemies that would spawn on the ground would, let's say, would run out towards you. Enemies that spawned on the roof would maybe like shoot towards you, maybe like jump to the ground and run towards you or something like that. Then you have like, enemies in the air that would kind of fly out towards you as well. But I spent most of the last week just kind of focused on getting the punching to feel a bit better and getting a little bit more accurate. And as you kind of see my little tracking spheres that I've got here, what I ended up doing was just taking a sample of the player position. So these purple spheres are just a visualization of the samples that I'm recording, and all I do is I just sum those together so I can kind of get essentially the direction that the hand is going will influence more than any of the jitter that's recorded for the hands that I'm tracking here, and that kind of reduces that. Oh, you get a frame that jitters, and we happen to sample that when we do our direction, so that kind of smooths that out a little bit. I'm for sure there's a little bit more accurate smoothing things that you could do, but this is actually working pretty well. So you can control how many samples it takes and at what frequency it samples, and then you call a sum method that just sums up the individual directions. What I decided to do as well was to, instead of using the direction, because I would have to essentially say, well, at the end of this, if you happen to in case to punch this way, your horizontal motion might be more than your forward motion, and that may influence the sample. So I would need a way of scaling that. And then I was like, actually, wait, there actually is something that's already being recorded, and that's velocity. So I'm doing a sample buffer for both motion and for velocity, and it takes into account the velocity when it does the impact. So if you punch something, what's actually adding together is the velocity of the hand. So the samples of the velocity, and that's what it's using for the forward direction, where the position of these points are controlled by the samples of the position. What I also worked on is, again, if you kind of see it there, if I can get one, is once you punch something, it becomes a projectile, and it will hit other things behind it, and they react to it by dropping out of the sky. So that's pretty cool. So I actually want that to be something where it's just like, oh, okay, there's a enemy on that rooftop or something like that, and you'll be able to punch it back towards the enemy. But I spent a lot of time working with the punching because that's going to be the main way that you interact with the app. So I wanted to make sure that it felt really good and that was really accurate. One of the things I also worked on, we're going to let some of these enemies build up again. I'll focus, show you one of the other things. And I'm carefully trying to frame my messy room here. But one of the things that you can do, and I still need to kind of work on how what it feels, is that you can actually grab these guys and throw them. Actually collide with something. So we grab one of these, toss it, that one missed. And that's an issue with the collider shape on this UFO. But you can grab the UFOs, toss them. And the way that it works now is essentially there's a hand open component. So you grab it. Right now it doesn't drop, but if you never close your hand, it doesn't actually count as a catch. But once you close your hand, now it's throwable and you can take it and toss it. But eventually what happens is if you never close your hand, it'll just fall out of your hand. In that case, I can grab more than one because I'm not limiting that currently. I got a left hand throw there, so that was actually pretty cool. So you can actually do that. So there's a kill floor that's down here, which essentially if any of the entities collide with it, they immediately terminate and they play that little sound effect. So I'm actually starting to look into some of the sound design. That's very low. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it in this particular video. But yeah, so I'm working on that. I'm also working on how I want to progress between levels as I'm, figuring out how the layout of these is actually going to work. I was thinking, a lot of games they do like the different stages, so like the match through games or the temple run or something like that, where you're doing, oh yeah, this is level one, this is level two, this is level three. But actually, I don't think I want to do that for this particular game. I'm actually kind of leaning more towards, if you've played those old light gun games, the arcade light gun games, where you have a scene and maybe a few enemies pop out and you have to deal with that threat that's on the screen. And then you progress to the next level. So I'm thinking about kind of doing that, where I've got like different navigation aids, where it's like, okay, let's say this first level spawns two guys on the roof, a car or something like that in the background, and they're firing at you, and you have to defeat them. You'll do that, and then you'll move towards the next section of the level, and from there you'll have a choice of going like left and right. If you go left, you'll get into one area of the app. If you go to right, you'll get to one area of the game itself. So that's kind of more towards what I'm leaning at. I missed that throw. That's one of the things where I didn't end up doing the aim assist, because I got the punching pretty much where I wanted it to be, where if you're designing something that needs to be like a projectile needs to be rebounded at something, I think that's just an enemy design thing, where you'll just want to make sure that it's big enough that the player can reliably hit it, and not feel frustrated. But the throwing, because that depends on when you release your hand. So you can see if I release my arm a little bit early, it goes off at an angle, and that may be an area where I still do aim assist, or in this case, because I'm doing like every frame, I'm doing a convex cast from the face, so I actually do know what you're looking at. And maybe like if you throw something, it'll do some sort of bend or curve towards what you're throwing, and make it feel a little bit more arcadey. In that, I can essentially do, in this case, I'm using the same impulse that I'm using when I punch. But in this case, if I throw something, like maybe if I'm looking at the screen, in this case, I release my hand like way back here. And actually, this is actually one thing I've noticed as well, is that if you, right here, you lose tracking, see it's gone. And that's because I'm tracking the hand open, hand close. And when you put your hand behind your head or lose tracking, currently it just sets your hand to indeterminate and just drops the item out of your hand, which is probably going to be frustrating, like if you're in the heat of the moment and you're flailing about. Another thing that I noticed with this is that if you lose tracking of the hand, when the hand comes back into being able to be tracked, the timestamp is actually a little bit further behind than the timestamp that was last recorded. So one of the things that I was doing when I was applying my initial punch direction is, if I was, again, winding up a punch and then going back, I would initially have a large vector where the tracking on the hand was a frame behind, and was possibly influencing the poor direction of the punch. But in this case, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, punch is much more accurate. I still have an issue where sometimes applying a punch makes the enemy disappear. It's much less frequent now. The majority of the time I found is that essentially the doing the math wasn't mathing, and I was getting basically one of the fields in the vector was not a number, or just being super small, and the precision was throwing everything off. So I fixed most of that with the sampling. So the samples really kind of fixed that main problem. But yeah, so this is what I've been working on. I think I'm at a point now where I have to work. What I'm going to work on next is the progression. So in this case here, I'm not tracking like how many enemies you've defeated or anything like that. So in each section of the game, there will be some sort of condition. So defeat these 3 enemies, find an object in here, something like that, or maybe like destroy those buildings or something that will cause the game to progress to the next section. So I'm really thinking about, again, designing these out as levels. Each level will essentially be like a pre-made block of assets. And they'll kind of, load in as we need it to. So in this case, we'll probably load, like 2 or 3 sections at a time. And as we're progressing, we would go through and load in additional ones. And those would load in the conditions that they would satisfy. So each time you load into a section, it triggers some sort of event, like enemy spawning, a boss event happening or something like that. But yeah, so that's currently what I'm planning on doing right now. But yeah, so this has been my update for this week. And again, hopefully when I'm at a point now where I've got a complete level designed, where I'm designing that first level. We will do more updates to kind of as progress goes further along. And I'll be looking at replacing these stand-in UFOs with more appropriate enemies, although I do love my UFOs. But anyway, that's been my update. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody. Let me get my hand working. Actually, no, can't do that. There we go.